Hello, today we will learn the concepts of MVC. Now, MVC is an architecture that has been adapted a long back. MVC can be implemented by any programming language. It could be implemented by .NET, Java, PHP, C++, any programming languages. Basically, MVC is an architecture that has certain constraints and a certain way in which different modules interact with each other and still they remain isolated. So why we need MVC? MVC what it generally does is segregates different modules. For instance, if I visit a shopping mall, if I need to purchase a watch, I will first approach to the assistant to locate me where I will find the watches. So he will assist me to a place where a salesman could display me different watches. So like the salesman doesn't know what I'm up to, and so as the assistant doesn't know what the salesman is going to display me. So generally in MVC, all different modules are separated, they interact, but still they remain isolated. So we will go one by one and understand what MVC is all about. So the first one comes is the model. Now model generally means where all your business logic is. It means the data. So in short, model means business logic where all your business logic will be stored in and all operations on the data will be implemented. Second thing is the view part. Now view generally means the response or the presentation part that is rendered back to the user. For instance, if you go to a browser and just write the URL www.google.com, the server will respond you back a Google homepage. So generally in Java, the presentation part is generally done by either JSP, HTML, or it could also be done by a servlet. In .NET, you can have .aspx, in PHP, .php file, and in C++, it's again a .js file. Oh, sorry, .c files. Then we have something called controller. Controller are the most important part of MVC. What it generally does, it handles the user's request. For instance, if you write again in the URL www.google.com and if you're implementing an MVC architecture, what it does, every request will first go to the controller. A controller handles all the user requests and also it coordinates the view and the model part. Model and view, they cannot directly interact, and sometimes they interact but they cannot directly interact. So controller is the one who is going to interact with the model and the view. So in short, controller handles the user's request and it coordinates between you and the model. So controller is going to play the most important part in your MVC because every request has to go through controller and the response has to be not compulsory, but response are generally again reverted back to the users. So model generally means data, the data where the data and also the operations that are implemented on data. View generally means those JSP, HTML files, and controller are generally the servlet in Java. So we are implementing MVC in Java. So again, pressing up the contents, we have in MVC generally stands for model, view, and controller. Model is the data part, view is the JSP and HTML, and controller is the servlet part. Now we'll take a small example where a customer visits a shopping mall to purchase a watch. Now customer has no idea where to find the watch. So what does a shopping system comprises of? We have someone called assistant who is going to assist you or to locate you where you can find your items, like it could be a watch, it could be some electronic gadgets, or it could be your clothing, anything. Then we have something called salesman. There could be different salesmen, or there could be a salesman for watch, there could be salesman for clothes, there could be salesman for electronic gadgets, and etc. And then we have something called cashier. Yes, there could be cashier could be also different for like cashier for salesman department. There could be a different cashier for electronic department. There could be different cashier, or you can like there could be one single cashier who does all kind of billing. And then we have something called validators. Generally, you don't find validators, but yeah, in like an online shopping system, first your login credentials are validated, and then you are allowed to shop. So generally, in shopping mall, you are allowed to pass through a screen, or you are allowed to pass through a gateway where you are detected whether you do not have, whether you are not with some harmful equipments that can destroy a shopping mall. So those are called validators. And anyway, let's start how the flow generally begins. So me being the customer, I want to purchase a watch. So what I will do, I will first go and approach the assistant and tell her that generally assistant or C, so I will tell her that I need a watch. Now what does an assistant does? First, he will allow me and ask me to go to the validator to validate whether or to verify I am not with any harmful equipments. Once I am done with the validator comes back and tells the assistant, no, this customer is all good and he is just a genuine person and he is allowed to do shopping. Now, once the validator part has been done, this assistant helps me to locate where I can find the watch. So he asks me or he assists me to the particular salesman who is concerned to show me different kind of watches. So I want to purchase a watch. So assistant help me to locate where I can find the watches. Now the salesman's job is to display all the different kind of watches he has. So he displays me all different kind of watches, and among them I found something called a Rado watch and I want to purchase it. I ask the salesperson that I need this Rado watch and just do whatever it requires to. The salesman takes the Rado watch, comes back to the assistant and tells that this person wants this person's the customer means me has purchased this Red watch. And now what does customer does? Customer has to do the billing part. No, sorry, customer won't do the billing part. Billing part has to be done by the cashier. So then the assistant allows me to visit the cashier for the billing purpose. So what he is going to do is he's going to ask the cashier that this man has purchased the Red watch and we need to do the billing part. So the cashier doesn't know who was the salesman, or he even doesn't know who was the customer. What he knows is he has a watch and he has to make a bill of it. That's all. So the cashier's job is completely isolated with the salesman's job. Exactly. The reason is because the salesman's job is only to display different kind of watches, and the salesman's job is completely isolated with the cashier's job because the salesman doesn't know what is a rebate, is there any offer or not. But generally salesman does know the offer, but he doesn't know how the transaction is going to be. So this the salesman doesn't know how the transaction is to be. It could be a debit card, could be direct cash, or it could be through credit card. So salesman's job is to just display, and the cashier's job is to just to bill. It doesn't matter if there is a Rado watch, the Staten watch, whatever it is. Now after the billing has been done, the cashier gives the assistant the receipt of the total bill. Now I being the customer, I pay the bill and I get the watch back. So assistant again gives the watch back to me. So you just understand the flow. First I being the customer approach the assistants allowed me to validate, and again when the validation has been successfully been done, I am allowed to shop. Now assistant approaches me, or sorry, assist me to approach the salesman where I can find different watches. So I purchased this Red watch, this very cool watch, and then the salesman again comes back with the watch to the assistant. Uh, the assistant again calls the cashier to do the billing part of the watch, and again the cashier does the billing part, and again it is reverted back to the assistant. So if you see the different aspects, we have something called salesman is a different module, cashier is a different module, and validator is a different module. Generally validator and cashier comes under your model part. Cashier, you can think it as a something called view part. It's not something, it's a view part, and assistant is a controller because the request came to assistant and the request respond was again back to the customer through the assistant only, because this part is playing the most important role. All incoming and outgoing requests are mapped by the assistant. Assistant knows that where I will find the watch. If somebody comes again with something called I need some clothes, then assistant maybe probably like he would be locating to some different salesman who will be displaying them different clothes. So it's the assistant who is going to play a very important role in your MVC architecture. So brushing up the content again, let's take another slide where we have again in the MVC pattern, I have a customer, I have something called assistant, I have something called salesman, and this validator and cashier. So who is the controller? Controller is your assistant, absolutely, because every request are mapped by the controller. And now we have something called view part. Salesman does the view part. He's going to display you all kind of watches that are available, and then the model part is a validator and cashier, because all operations that has to be performed is done by this model part. So generally validator, cashier, and there could be lots more of model classes inside a model package that does part of model does. Generally model does all business logic. So like validator is again a business logic. Cashier in turn can have different submodules. It could be transaction, a payment gateway, something called selecting different banks, and blah, and etc and etc. So generally this is how a complete MVC in real life is. So we have controller, we have view, and we have model. Now all these modules are isolated from each other. View doesn't know how the transaction is going to be occurred, and the model part doesn't know what all different watches are available in the shopping system, and so on. The assistant even doesn't know that what are the different watches present, and assistant even doesn't know how the transaction is being carried out. So this is the way how MVC, and this is the important reason why MVC is mainly practiced or mainly been followed by different industries. If it had been not that tough, industry wouldn't have been implemented. I tell you, MVC is a very simple concept, and that is the reason why all industry implements it. Now let's take a real life scenario, or you can say an implementation scenario, how it really looks like. This is how it all looks like. First, this part is the client part that interacts or sends a request to the server. Now we have something called controller. Generally in Java we have servlet does the part of controller. Servlet is then again they refer to filter. Filter are something called web.xml. Those have mappings, and well, these are different concepts. I will let you know in my next video. Now again, controller is the one uh, who communicates with view and the model. So controller has only given the right to communicate between view and model. In very rare scenario you will see a view part is generally communicating with model, but this is not like we really want to be. View part has again respond back to the controller, and based upon the response by the view part, different models, different model classes being called. And then this is the database where yes, database is generally for validation. We must have a database where all the authenticated users and their passwords are validated. So in turn, if there is a login request, the controller maps to a model class. This model class connects with the database to retrieve the user ID and password authenticated. If it finds that yes, it has been present in the database, it tells the controller, okay, now this person is authenticated, and you can render back a success page. So in the next video I will give you a very small example like how MVC is implemented in a real life scenario. And still then, thank you for watching for this video.